Hi everyone, welcome back. My name is Eleanor. I have a lot of thoughts in my head, and I have to say that the main reason that I'm on BookTube, to be frank, is because I need somewhere where I can just talk about everything I've read in the week, thought in the week. So I have a lot of, so immediately I've got things in my head now that are not even in my notes, and because they're not in my notes, maybe okay. So first of all, I want to say I thought of something. So this week I thought of another difference between reading prose and reading poetry, which I haven't heard people talk about before. So maybe this might help you as it helped me. Reading poetry is more thinking than reading. The amount of time you spend reading a book of poetry or a poem is minuscule compared to the amount of time you're going to be thinking about it and also thinking about your feelings about it. So that is something that's profoundly different, at least for me, from reading prose. When you're reading prose, you are in the prose, you are reading and you sit and read. And you think about it afterwards. You may pause every once in a while to think, but the flow is ongoing. And to get the most out of prose, you might have a highlighter or a pencil, but you're not going to stop and ponder as you do with poetry. Poetry is really thinking. So if you're looking for a hobby, let's say you want to think more. Now, I can't remember where I read it, but someone, I don't know, some wise person was saying that they enjoy just the act of sitting in a chair and thinking. I'd never heard anyone say that before, but you know what? I do too. And I'll also say, and this might sound ridiculous and, trivial, but I don't think it is. Nowadays, a lot of people go to cafes. A lot of people go to cafes to socialize, but they also go by themselves to read. And poetry is an excellent thing to read in a cafe. If you have time to yourself, or maybe you have too much time to yourself, and you're one of these people who goes to your local cafe, it's much more enjoyable, I find, to sit and read a few poems in a book and ponder them as you sip on your coffee and watch the people and kind of, listen to what people are talking about. I can never concentrate on anything else. I can't concentrate on prose when I'm in a cafe. I feel like, it would, you'd have to have a great ability to concentrate to be able to do that. But in any case, now I'm completely going off topic. And have I introduced myself? Have I said my name is Eleanor, welcome and welcome back? Anyway, it's lovely to have you here. Thank you for returning. So I left you off with a lot to mention a couple of things from last video. So how fantastic is it to on BookTube we talk a lot about translators, and we do. I'm talking about us as if like we know each other, we're a club. But generally, I do feel like we're a community that really pays attention to translators, and we mention them and we thank them in our videos. And I had the absolute honor and privilege of having David Colmer, the translator of the Nahum Weinberg book that I mentioned in my last video, listen to my previous video. Now, this is not about me. It is about him. It's about the thrill for me is to give the thanks. And I realize I should be writing emails. I should be writing letters to thank my favorite poets and to thank my favorite translators. Mr. Colmer might not have realized what a huge difference he made to my reading life just because he translated this wonderful Dutch poet. So you have a wonderful poet, you have a wonderful translator, and they have to work together. And then you have to have a reader who, enjoys that kind of poetry. And so this is, it was really a highlight and made me so happy. Thank you, Mr. Colmer. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. And moving on now, I also left you with Edgar Allan Poe, and things have been happening. Always check out my comment section because I have the best viewers, the best people who comment. So thank you to the amazing viewer who pointed out to me that there is a controversy about whether Edgar Allan Poe, if you remember, this is the book I was talking about, whether Edgar Allan Poe actually wrote The Raven, and if that was the case, also if he also wrote, The Philosophy of Composition. Now here I am, newbie Eleanor, coming into Edgar Allan Poe, fresh, green, and this is I think this is a big lesson moment. Don't lack confidence in yourself. If you feel something, if you feel like you wonder, you read a poem that's famous and everyone says it's amazing, and then you read a work of criticism by that same poet and you think, oh, these are words of wisdom, I must take them to heart. But if a little voice inside your head is like, well, I've read a lot of poetry and the poem is okay, but whatever. And if you've sort of read even a little bit of, poetry reviews or really interviews, if you've read or watched interviews with poets talking about their craft, I would say, listen to the little voice. Because with the philosophy of composition, and this is of course following on from the last video, I was scared to say it because I don't want, because I was scared to say it because I'm nobody, because I'm Eleanor, because I'm not a professor, I'm not a teacher, I'm not anything. I enjoy reading. I just enjoy reading. I thought to myself, poets don't write like this. The way Edgar Allan Poe talks about how he wrote The Raven is just bizarre. Poets don't write like mathematicians. Now, the interesting thing is, and why I hesitated, is because there is a lot of math. There is a lot of math in poetry. I mean, there's math in linguistics, but in poetry, there's a fantastic counting. There's a counting of words, of syllables, of accents, and the scientific nature of rhyme. How does the mouth work to make a sound, and what makes one sound close to another sound? It's as much craft as art. And so I thought to myself, well, maybe Edgar Allan Poe did methodically write The Raven as if he was putting together a mathematical equation. But now that my wonderful, commenter mentioned all of this, I allow myself to laugh a little bit. For example, and I'll give you an example of Edgar Allan Poe, what he writes in his essay. And again, it's on the internet, you can read it, the essay that is. He writes that the work proceeded step by step to its completion with the precision and rigid consequence of a mathematical problem. I call bullshit. I mean, have you really? Really? Oh, so funny. And then something happens. So this is what happens to me. And this is why I always have something to say every week. I'm thinking Edgar Allan Poe, And at the same time, now I'm thinking favorite poets because, oh, okay. Yes, I have to go back to my notes. Let's just get this out of the way. I said that I have a love-hate relationship last week with poetry. Oh, yes, I do. But I also love poetry. It's like a family member. You love them. Can't stand them, you love them. I mean, a healthy family. I'm not talking about, a problematic family. I'm talking about a healthy family, a beautiful family. You have mixed emotions. I criticized Emily Dickinson tongue in cheek. I'll be the first to admit I love Emily Dickinson. Is she one of my favorite poets? Yes, yes. But, I don't go to her for comfort. I might go to James Schuyler for comfort. For Emily Dickinson, I go to her when I want an intellectual puzzle. Just as I would maybe go to a crossword, although I'm not into crosswords, instead of going to a crossword, I go to Emily Dickinson. It's an intellectual puzzle. Now, for several years, I thought there's something wrong. Like, why am I like, poems are not puzzles. You don't have to solve them. But then I mentioned it to a poetry professor I met once, and he said, one of the main attractions of Emily Dickinson is that there is this puzzling nature. That's okay. You're meant for that. It's meant for that. You as the reader are meant to do that. So I thought that was interesting. So going back, follow my train of thought. After the last video, I don't just shut it off. I'm like thinking. It's like I change my mind. And I worry that I'm not going deep enough. So I go deeper. Who else is on my list of favorite poets? And I, of course, remember, oh my God, Elizabeth Bishop. How could I forget Elizabeth Bishop? I didn't forget Elizabeth Bishop. It's just, doesn't everyone love Elizabeth Bishop? Do I want to be one of many? Yeah, I love Elizabeth Bishop. So I am not going to talk about anything. I'm not going to talk about her. You can go on Wikipedia and look her up and find out about, who she is if you're new to her. I will say that the book I have is this one, and I enjoy it tremendously. It's pretty much all her poems plus a few extras. But then one time, and I forgot about this. Then I buy everything that I can come across. Well, not everything. I mean, I do have a budget. But years and years and years ago, I bought this, and this is highly recommend if you love Elizabeth Bishop and you want to read a bit more. Colm Tóibín, who is the incredible fiction writer. Now his latest novel, just as an aside, is Long Island, I think. Yes. And I didn't read Brooklyn. I didn't read his previous books, not really into him, but I happened to pick up Long Island. I read the first page, couldn't put it down. So if you're looking for a really good read, Long Island it is, and you don't have to have read the previous Brooklyn. But in any case, he loves to write about poets, and he also he wrote a biography of Henry James, I think. Anyway, he also writes, he's very good at also describing queer writers. I can't put my finger on it, but God, he's wonderful. Anyway, this book that he writes about Elizabeth Bishop is really wonderful. I can't tell you how many times I've gone back to this. I cannot tell you how wonderful this book is. And it's so little. But then, of course, okay, hang on. I'll be right back. There's also this one. Okay, I haven't read this for a while, but Words in Air, Elizabeth Bishop and Robert Lowell, the complete correspondence between two poets. Now, I've read hardly any of Robert Lowell. He's on my list to read. Just have a look. Have a look at this photo. Doesn't everyone want a friendship like that? Now, Elizabeth Bishop was gay, of course. Robert Lowell was not. And so there is a little bit of a frisson, which I also very much like, very much appreciate. But apart from that, there's so much in this book about the writing life, the way they talk about each other's poetry and their own poetry, the huge amount of respect and affection and love between them. Yeah, what a relationship. See, now I've remembered how much fun it is to look through this. Thank you, BookTube, for pushing me to look further into things I haven't looked at for years. Yeah, and you see Edgar Allan Poe. So I thought to myself, Edgar Allan Poe and his mathematical poetry, method. I mean, just read those letters between Robert Lowell and Elizabeth Bishop, and you'll see, like, they're not talking about anything like Poe. So what am I going to do? And then I remember there's a book. I bought this book ages ago, and I'll be honest with you, it was one of those books that I bought, and then I looked at it and I thought, why did I buy it? But I'm so glad I bought it. Now, years later, I'm so glad I bought it. It's Elizabeth Bishop's Uncollected Poems, Drafts, and Fragments. Although I should say, if you buy this, it has most of the fragments in it anyway, and the unpublished works. So save your money. However, this is a lovely book, but I think part of the reason I stayed away from it is because I didn't really know anything about Edgar Allan Poe, and I always thought, oh, I must read Edgar Allan Poe before I read this for some weird reason. The title refers to a poem that they found amongst her things that is unfinished, clearly unfinished, and she was a perfectionist and meticulous, and she probably would be horrified, but in any case. And the title is Edgar Allan Poe and the Jukebox. And how fascinating is it now? So I come across it right after I've read the comment in my previous video about how did Poe write that poem, etc., etc. So let me show you what it looks like when you come across this poem in the book. This is what it looks like. You know, she crossed it out. It's not a poem. It's maybe the first draft, but she doesn't even say on it first draft. But she's very sure about the title. And what I'm interested in is finding out what she thought about Poe. And in the notes at the back, who annotated this? Edited and annotated by Alice Quinn. Alice Quinn, in the notes in the back, has a whole page about how interested Elizabeth Bishop was in Poe. But she really talks about his stories more than his poetry, and his idea of beauty, possibly. But I haven't gone into that in detail. In fact, none of this has been gone in full. I'm hesitating to talk about it here because I haven't really gone into a deep dive. But I also feel like I want to bring it out so that maybe one of you can look into it further. Part of this unfinished poem goes as follows. Poe said that poetry was exact, and she has exact in italics. But, okay, I'll read it again. Poe said that poetry was exact, but pleasures are mechanical and know beforehand what they want and know exactly what they want. Do they obtain that single effect that can be calculated like alcohol or like the response to the nickel? How long does the music burn? Like poetry or all your horror, half as exact as horror here? I don't really understand the last bit. I think she was trying to figure out her opinion, her feelings on his short stories, on his horror, possibly on the horror of his poetry. Who knows? It's an unfinished poem. But what fascinates me is the idea of the jukebox, because at the beginning of this draft, she talks about, well, this is how it starts. Easily through the darkened room, the jukebox burns, the music falls. Then later she writes, as easily as the music falls, the nickels fall into the slots. The drinks like lonely waterfalls, in night descend the separate throats. Further on, the burning box can keep the measure strict always and the downbeat. Again, this is drafting of lines. So you've got the idea, first of all, of music, and of course the meta idea of writing poetry. Then you've got the idea of you put a nickel in the slot and you get the song. Magical. But is it? She also mentions alcohol. She's got at the beginning, she's got the drinking, the people in this dance hall, or wherever it is, are drinking as they're putting the nickel in the slot and dancing and listening to the music. And then remember, towards the end, she said, do they obtain that single effect that can be calculated like alcohol? And she was an alcoholic, from what I've read. She struggled a lot with alcohol. And if you talk to, I mean, it's well known that a lot of poets, I mean, you know, with, for example, the New York school, they would take certain hallucinogenic drugs, as far as I've, read. And there's a sense that you need to go into a very strange place to write poetry. So we're talking about really the opposite of Poe. But then when you think about what I love most about Elizabeth Bishop is that she's so, you would never say she's stream of consciousness. She's so exacting. She's so exacting. And again, I used to make fun of people who said, oh, poetry is about clarity. I still don't think it is about clarity. Although with Elizabeth Bishop, I think that was her aim. Crystal clear, word after word. And also, she is quite mathematical. She's quite scientific in her poems. You can see she's very aware of the form working as a kind of equation, and she even has the themes in her poems. Sometimes I feel like there's the theme of something mechanical going click, 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 and that is actually how her poetry works as well. And it was very interesting to me how she brought Poe into the picture too. Don't you think? I'll find you that poem that I'm thinking of that goes click, click, click. Great review, Eleanor. Click, click, click. Cirque d'hiver. It's from her 1946 book, North and South. I might not read all of it. Across the floor flits the mechanical toy, fit for a king of several centuries back. A little circus horse with real white hair, his eyes a glossy black. He bears a little dancer on his back. She stands upon her toes and turns and turns. A slanting spray of artificial roses is stitched across her skirt and tinsel bodice. Above her head she poses another spray of artificial roses. His mane and tail are straight from Chirico. He has a formal melancholy soul. He feels her pink toes dangle toward his back along the little pole that pierces both her body and her soul, and goes through his and reappears below. Under his belly is a big tin key. He canters 3 steps, then he makes a bow. Canters again, bows on one knee, canters, then clicks and stops and looks at me. The dancer by this time has turned her back. He is the more intelligent by far, facing each other rather desperately. His eye is like a star. We stare and say, well, we have come this far. Of course I read it all. How can you stop? Now, she even had click in here, and I forgot about that. But not only that, the rhyming, the rhythm, the beat, the rhyming, the image after image, so clear, crystal clear. Very open poem, but not difficult in the sense that it's such a pleasure to read. It's enjoyable, but you know there's a lot of depth in it, and you're going to get something different every time you read it, again and again and again. So compare this to Poe. Poe is not my favorite poet, suffice to say. I think if you want to go looking for great rhyme, Elizabeth Bishop is for you. Anyway, let's move on. Okay, I was looking at my notes and what's the time? I was going to start a conversation about the other poet who's on my favorite list. You see, I can very easily tell you who my favorite poets are. I just need to think about it a bit. The next poet I want to talk about is Lucie Brock-Broido. But what I'll do is I'm not going to start talking about her now. Completely different from Elizabeth. Elizabeth Bishop is here, Lucie Brock-Broido is here, different universes, but they connect because they're fabulous. But Lucie Brock-Broido, I will refer you. I went back and listened to the video I made about her when I was doing the Silly Challenge, which meant that I was reading a book of poetry a day. That was a crazy time. But it brought me to Lucie Brock-Broido. And when I re-listened to the video, and by the way, I re-listened to my own video. First of all, I was really surprised because I didn't remember saying what I said. And I'm still proud of that video, so that's good. I put it on a much faster speed, I think 1.75. And so you might want to do that too, just to get to the point. But I would say that's a great introduction to Lucie Brock-Broido. And then maybe in the next video, I'll talk about what it's like to read her 2 years later. So that's interesting. So I won't do that, but I will mention one last book. Now, I got this book many, many years ago, and it's one of those books that I keep coming back to all the time, and I would highly recommend it for many different reasons. The Art of the Sonnet, edited, chosen, and essays by Stephanie Burt and David Mikics. Okay, let me explain. It's a book of sonnets, The Art of the Sonnet. It goes through sonnets from the 16th century all the way to the 21st. And the choice of of each sonnet is wonderful to begin with, because A, it's a variety, but second, they made the effort to not choose sonnets that you can find are being discussed everywhere. It's something a little bit different. And their discussion, one of them, either Burt or Mikics, writes the essay describing in great detail what's happening in each sonnet. So it's an introduction to sonnets. It's an introduction to the history of a certain kind of poetry. It acts as a very, very good anthology if you want to get into, if you want a little intro, a little like one poem by one poet, without, I don't know, there's something about, when I pick up a general anthology, I don't like anthologies on theme, like poems about the sea, poems about death. I'm not into that. I don't know. I just don't, it's too much for me to have a whole book about the sea and I'm jumping from one poet to the other, and I'm like, it's too much for me. I don't like best of, because I'm always thinking of why this particular editor chose these. And I also know that if you look at best of anthologies from 30, 40, 100 years ago, whatever, I'm exaggerating, but and you see, oh, you know, maybe two of those poets actually went on to write more and the others didn't. And I just, it's not my, this is good because the all-encompassing theme is the form of the sonnet. So you see how different personalities use the sonnet for in different ways, in different purposes. And there is an Elizabeth Bishop sonnet in here, and there's also a Lucie Brock-Broido sonnet in here. And what I found was, when I went and revisited these two poets, I went back to my shelf, got out the books, and then thought to myself, I'm overwhelmed. That's when I picked this up and just read the one sonnet from one and the one sonnet from the other. And it just calmed me. So I think you'll learn a lot from this kind of book if that's the sort of thing you're looking for. And maybe, I don't know, because it is quite old, maybe you'll find it as a secondhand book, or maybe you'll, I don't know, came out in 2010. Okay, so I think that's it for now. To be continued, is hoping you're having a lovely weekend. And don't forget, the only real property is the property of the mind.